what is the definition of consenting to sexual activity in Canada? Well, first of all, under Section 273.1 of the Criminal Code, consenting to sexual activity means a person is voluntarily choosing to engage in that sexual activity. There has to be free will, there has to be a yes. That yes has to be conveyed in different ways. Well, first of all, yes can be conveyed by body language, but that's very dangerous for the other person to just rely on body language. I would recommend as everyone that you get yes and body language and it has to be at all aspects. So from start to finish during the sexual activity, there has to be a yes. And that yes, I recommend that you get otherwise there's a total gray area and you could wind up in court. Body language communicating yes and yes at every stage. This is particularly important for couples when they just start dating, especially because there can be miscommunication. I'll give you an example. First of all, the court looks at things subjectively. So they'll, for example, a young woman, they'll say, what was she thinking? Did she want to have the sex at the time? If they believe her that she said, no, I didn't, in my mind, I didn't want to have sex, but she was giving some signals about the body language, well, that's still a sexual assault. Now, the person has to prove that they had an honest but mistaken belief in consent, and that's a difficult thing to pull off. So you should get yes. Obviously, as couples progress in their relationship, body language can become easier to interpret, but this is a very important thing. Now, consent, you can't consent with a person who's extremely drunk, who's out of it. So if a person's incapacitated, they don't have the ability to consent. Another person can't give a person consent. Consent has to be conveyed at every step of the sexual act from start to finish, very important. And a person can't abuse their position of trust as an employer, for example, manipulating the person to sex. If any of those things are present, it's what's called vitiates, in other words, gets rid of the consent. And drunkenness and incapacity are a big thing, of course. Of course, a person can be fairly drunk and consent. I mean, there's no question about that. But there's a line. It's a gray area line. And again, I don't recommend ever having sex with a drunken person because of this. You have to be very, very careful because that person could come and say they don't remember, they didn't consent, and maybe they didn't. and especially, when a person's too drunk to have sex. I mean, you have to be very careful of this. And couples, they have to be very careful in the dating relationship. You always have to be careful. You have to get consent at every step. So let's talk a little bit about what's proven in court. Well, the Crown has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person did not consent. And they examine what was in that person's mind. They're going to testify and say, I didn't want to have sex. I said no. If that's the case and they're believed, to a high level beyond a reasonable doubt, the person's going to be found guilty. Now, I gave you the scenario. This happens sometimes in court. It's more a rare occurrence. But there are scenarios where there's no talk. The woman's expressing some degree of body language, which is saying yes, but she's not, the person didn't ask her. Very dangerous to engage in sex in that scenario. You might win your trial, you might not. I mean, it depends how, because some people, they don't want to do something, but they convey a little bit through their body language. Very dangerous. Don't do that. Don't go there. Just make sure you get yes at every step of the procedure. And when you're leading an honest but mistaken belief in communicative sense, you can't rely on your own intoxication. Oh, I was drunk too, I had a hard time interpreting it. Oh, you can't rely on willful blindness. Oh, I just went ahead and did it. I thought she was consenting because she lifted her leg once. Or reckless behavior where you don't really want to know when you proceed. So these are difficult defenses to bring off. The safe route for any young people out there or anyone really do not, especially early in a dating relationship, you shouldn't really have sex when you're drinking heavily. There's no question about it. It just leads to a lot of court cases. I've been involved in dozens and dozens and dozens of them over the years, and it's not pretty. Miscommunications can happen, misinterpretations can happen, and you need to get that yes. So that's what I'm conveying to you. Under our laws of consent in Canada, that voluntarily agreement to enter into the sexual act has to be communicated from start to finish. And the woman or the man, for that matter, they can withdraw their consent at any time. As soon as they say stop or no, or their body language even says that, you have to stop. If you proceed beyond that, let's say you're having sexual intercourse and the person says stop and you keep proceeding, well, that's a sexual assault. That could result in 2.5 to 3.5 years in jail right there, just for that moment, brief stupidity of yours of not listening to your partner in a particular situation. Now, there's some difficult concepts. There's a lot of gray areas. Unfortunately, as a lawyer, I deal with these gray areas all the time, and there's so many cases where, the client says he thought she was consenting when there was no yes, and you just can't. You can't be involved early on in a relationship and not get all of these elements together. And in fact, in all relationships, I recommend getting it from start to finish, from the time you're married until the time you're old. There needs to be yes at all times, and there needs to be body language. In that way, you're not going to wind up with a sexual assault charge if you follow that script. Thank you for watching our video. We are absolutely committed to bringing you the best possible criminal and DUI educational videos. If you found this video helpful, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you've been charged with a criminal offense in Ontario and require our services, please click on the link in the description below.